Oh, it's too low. Hi, it's your meme mom. Oops, I just spilled some tea. That's disgusting. Historically accurate Disney princesses. We all want to see them. We never get to see them. Why? Why is that happening? What is wrong? So first of all, I want to admit that I am not a fashion historian despite whatever you might think. And I tend to be wrong about things. What is that? And I think it's important to admit that. And that's what some people should know when they make those videos, because not everyone is an expert on everything. Let's face it. Talking about every Disney princess that ever existed, they all come from different cultures, they all come from different backgrounds and different eras. It's not something that a single fashion historian is capable of knowing. It's such a huge knowledge that obviously a single person does not have it all, because they would just have to know a lot of things. The first thing I'm gonna rant about when it comes to videos like this is that they only usually hire one, like a single fashion historian, to discuss a couple of things, or like to show a couple of things. Fashion historians' knowledge is usually limited to the time period or topic that they're most interested in, and just because they're fashion historians does not mean that they know everything about everything. So that's one thing. And I think when they have those videos when a single person is discussing things and they're not even experts in that particular culture, it's going to be extremely hard. Like, you can't do research for that in like one day. So obviously there are going to be some inaccuracies, and I just want to point out that sometimes in those types of videos, it's not the fault of the fashion historians per se, but it's often about who makes the video, who hires the fashion historian, and who think that a single person is gonna be enough, because it's often a work for a couple of people from different fields. That being said, I don't know, there's plenty of those on the internet, and I think what's bothering me the most, like, I do appreciate the work that went into those videos, especially the ones that feature models, and you know, there's probably a lot of people involved in terms of lighting, shooting it, editing it later, because the videos that only feature images, those are not that hard to make, but the like the wholly produced ones, those probably take a lot of time, effort and money. But the thing that bothers me is that they call themselves being historically accurate, or they're like, this is what they should actually look like. Whereas when you watch the videos, there's still so many inaccuracies that you're going like, nothing's changed. That's still not a thing that you were supposed to show.
Sometimes they would put on a hairpiece, veil, or crown if they were feeling especially fancy. The story would have taken place in the 18th century in France, so Belle's dresses should have matched the fashion of the times. During this time, fashion was of the Georgia in the 1840s. She drew this photo of Ariel in her wedding dress to show how the dress was
like, that is still a vastly stereotyped look. I think that comes from the fact that either the people making the videos are not consulting anyone and they're just kind of thinking they can guess it or like wing it. Either that, or they just don't have the access for the high quality costumes that actually are out there, and it's just a matter of reaching out to a couple of historical reenactors and you would just be really like set. Another thing is that time spans are often not narrowed enough, in my opinion. For example, when you're talking about Snow White and you're going like, oh, she's 16th century. The beginning of the 16th century and the end of the 16th century are completely different stories. There is just so much going on throughout the century that's not enough to just narrow it down to one century. If you're trying to go for an accurate look, you can even pick randomly, because obviously Disney did not narrow it down to a particular year or anything, but you could just narrow it down randomly just so you can focus better on one outfit or like one style. Imagine a movie being set in the 1970s and people going like,
this Disney movie was set in the 20th century.
That's not gonna be very accurate, is it? Because it might as well mean the Bella Pot gowns from the beginning of the century or the 1990s Spice Girls outfits.
If you wanna be my lover,
Guess we'll never know. Imagine someone going for a 20th century look and just mashing all of those looks together. Wouldn't that be funny? Another thing that bothers me, and that I've noticed in the videos where they use a fashion historian explaining things, is that I know it's probably because the videos are made for a wide audience and a wide audience could not care less about the professional terms, but they're not using the language that you expect a fashion historian to use.
A corset.
That's the next layer.
In the 18th century, corsets.
And that means they're not calling the pieces of clothing correctly. They're just going like this shirt or like this corset, and they're just kind of using those modern terms to explain the clothing, but they are actually incorrect. So if they're going for an accurate look or like an accurate representation of what the era was like, they should also use the accurate language for that. At least maybe I'm just nitpicking, I don't care. So another thing is that, funnily enough, people talking about accuracy often are not familiar with the Disney plots. Like, they just don't know the movies, so...
It's hard to place exactly when The Little Mermaid's story was supposed to take place, but artist Claire Hummel used context clues to place the story in Georgia in the 1840s.
How are you gonna say what the character is supposed to look like based on their upbringing or family or, you know, social status if you don't know those things in the first place? And obviously I think that's because fashion historians are not schooled in the history of Disney movies, obviously, but that's some research that the producer should have done to make sure that, you know, it's discussed correctly, and it's often not the case. Like, sometimes they'll just go like, oh, that's because she was Danish and she was born into this family, and the comments are just like frustrated fans that know the movie and they're like, no, that's not what happened. Those kind of things that are not that difficult to dig up. Like, you just have to do some research beforehand and make sure that the information you have is correct. And I think the problem with that is that often those things are not so obvious in the movie. Like, you just have to, I don't know, dig up some interviews with the creators, or sometimes the time span or like the time that the movie is set is often not so precise, and there are multiple theories trying to discuss that. In terms of like the movie plot that's actually included in the movie and is not some sort of vague suggestion that has been added by the creators, that is something that the creators of videos like this should have knowledge of, because that's what the video is about. It's about those Disney princesses, so it would be nice to know where they come from or what their family ties are. I have been watching some of the videos that have been posted on YouTube, and not all of them attempt to recreate the looks, like the accurate looks. Some of them just use the DeviantArt artist stuff, which I think is kind of nasty because they usually don't credit them. But most of those videos are still pretty inaccurate, whether it's just illustrations or not. And I found literally one video which has like 800 views, I think, which has been added by Rachel Boyd, that actually shows accurate, historically accurate dresses. And that's because this lady, whoever she is, I haven't checked her channel, used some actual imagery from the era. So she basically shows, like, you know, Renaissance paintings or medieval paintings to show what it's supposed to look like, instead of just going for some artists' images, which are often inaccurate because artists are creative and that's their job, and they interpret things and they often try to interpret actual costumes in a historical way. So obviously that's what they are allowed to do. What people are not allowed to do is take those images later and say, this is 100% historically accurate, and also we're not gonna credit the artist. So these are all the things that bother me. That being said, I haven't eaten my breakfast, and yeah, so see ya.